One. Hey, welcome to Rise the Podcast. This is the podcast that stands up for entrepreneurs. You know, the journey and being your own boss is what Rise stands for. And it's an acronym that stands for rising up. And boy, do we ever need to rise up as entrepreneurs. Impacting, that we do make an impact and we can make an impact. Being socially aware, that's the S. Entrepreneurs, that's the E. So that's what RISE stands for. And with us on our return episode, we've been away for the winter so far, is Mena Canonico. And Mena is a transformational teacher and guide who teams up with horses to help people experience more peace of mind, confidence, and freedom. Oddly enough, the horses are called the Freedom Herd. Mena shares the incredible wisdom stories that she herself and many clients have realized through the connection to Mena's herd of incredible horses. She teaches how to rapidly identify and release limiting stories, subconscious beliefs, and unresolved trauma that prevents them from moving forward to their soul calling. Mena is a masterful facilitator and coach. She joins forces with her dream team and to help you transform how you see yourself. She leverages her wisdom, expertise, and magical connections with her team to help you rapidly identify and release limiting beliefs, stories, and trauma so you can create the life of meaning, joy, and freedom you crave. Mena is based in Orangeville and joins us today from her home office. Good day to you, since this will show at another time. Mena, welcome.
Thank you so much, David. Happy to be here. So grateful. Thank you.
I'm grateful to you as well. My first question is, why Orangeville? What about where you are that spoke to you to locate there?
Wow. That's a great question. I guess I would say that I was guided to Caledon as our first location in July 2015. So I took a total leap of faith and went from a 1-bedroom apartment in Oshawa to a 30-acre horse property in Caledon, which is only about, it's less than 15 minutes from Orangeville. So I had never been to Caledon when I went to check out that farm. I had never been to Orangeville. So it was brand new for me. And I loved Orangeville. I loved the energy. It's a small town. It's north of the city. And Caledon was, kind of more country. And I loved it. Ended up moving. We moved 3 times in our first 3 years, which is part of what makes us great navigators or guides on your journey, because we're experts in transition. So, it just happened that on the 3rd move, I ended up not being on the same property as them and had to find another place. And I found this cute little spot in Orangeville. And it was like, after trying so many different places, I was like, okay, this is the place. And it's temporary, because ultimately the vision is to find my own farm that will be a retreat center where I can be on property with my herd again, and also invite people to come and stay for retreats and have, empowering and liberating experiences, whether it's an afternoon experience or a week experience or longer, depending on, what the situation might call for.
Yeah. And do you like the land and the vibe? Is that important for you as well?
100%. And so it's important to note, my horses are about 12 minutes from here. So I commute to Erin, just north of Hillsburg. And so the land there is a 100-acre tree farm. And the energy there, I've have many clients who tell me that as soon as they start coming into the driveway, the emotion comes up and the tears start falling. Wow. So energetically, it's like, it's a welcoming. So I'm very, very clear on the kind of land I'm also looking for and where we will end up. And I have got it, it's like so clear in my mind. So it's just a matter of when it's ready and when everything is in alignment. and that's when it'll happen. And in the meantime, it's all about patience, which I know for many entrepreneurs, that's a tough one.
It is, especially because we live in a bit of a fast food society, don't we? We go to the drive-through and we get our food within, or our coffee within minutes. So patience is a real tough one for entrepreneurs.
And we want the results immediately too, right? And
Yeah.
so sometimes, it's about trusting the journey, not sometimes, always. It's about trusting the journey and understanding that there are certain things, like I'm all about helping people clear the blocks, right? So it's like you've got who you are, which is pure love and magic and magnificence and power, just like the horses. And then you have all these experiences that, you've built up these layers. So, and meanings after experiences that have happened. So it's about clearing all that stuff out of the way. And that sometimes can take time, it's taken me a long time, and it can be easy to, allow ego to beat ourselves up over how long it's taking. And for me, it was like, oh, considering I was afraid of horses, terrified of horses in 2009 to where I've come now, it's huge progress. I want to be further ahead. Ego says you got to be further ahead. And it's like, yeah, but, I took on a team of mostly former rescues, and it's been about building a strong foundation, which is key for any entrepreneurs, building that strong foundation and building discipline and a strong foundation so that when everything is in alignment, you're more prepared.
Yeah. And I heard a few things here: alignment, patience, preparation, going with the feeling and the emotion as opposed to pushing. Right, because as entrepreneurs too, we do push, and we, and sometimes we push against a brick wall. And when we're pushing against a brick wall, maybe it's time to back off and just get into a place of surrender and trust. Would you agree?
100%. Yes. Because it's important to question too. It's like, okay, so if I'm pushing and the results aren't happening, for me, this has happened countless times. It's like, I'll have an event, an experience, and I'm trying to push it. And if you get quiet and curious, usually what happens is you find that there's an underlying belief that again is waiting to be surfaced, and that something will happen if this doesn't happen, or it means something. So it's really important to do that inner work and get curious and look at, okay, hold on, like this approach is not necessarily working. So what is that? What is my soul trying to tell me? What's here for me to see so that I can shift this, because obviously what's working or what's happening isn't working and creating the result that I'm looking for.
Yeah. Wow. It's a totally different way of operating, isn't it? Checking with the soul.
Yes. And I think back to what I said about alignment, right? It's like ego. What's one of the first things I teach people is how to distinguish or discern between the voice of the ego and the voice of your heart or your soul. So we're looking for alignment, mind, body, soul. And if something is off, we will not see the results that we're looking for. So it's in my work, what I encourage as often as possible and teach is how do we get all parts of us working in alignment so we don't have to struggle. So there isn't that same kind of fight. And anytime there is that fight, just recognize that's ego coming in, usually with some kind of story. And if we feel bad about anything, about not doing enough, about not making enough, about, whatever the case may be, if we start feeling bad, that's your indicator. That's the voice of the ego that's coming in to try and keep you from expressing authentically and becoming, powerful as a creator.
I want to shift a little bit. At first glance, doing the work you do can seem almost romantic, exciting. I mean, you're here you are, you've got access to a farm with trees, you're working with wonderful animals and the horses, healing those that you work with as clients. What does a day in the life look like for you, Mena? And is it romantic, or is there just a lot of grunt work to do too?
It's probably a bit of both. So a regular day, I mean, this is the thing. One of my top values is freedom, and I like variety. So that means, many horses have a different kind of lifestyle where they're in the barn, they're there for 12, 14, 15 hours overnight. Then you take them out, you clean stalls. So I've opted to let my horses be horses and live mostly free outside unless they need to come in because of weather. So I go to the barn whenever it suits my schedule. So for example, today I'm doing it after our conversation. Sometimes I go first thing in the morning. It all kind of depends on what they need, what I need. There is a lot of work involved, and it's a matter of perspective. It's really a matter of perspective. So when I go to the barn and I'm, like this, and ego says this is hard work and winter sucks, that's one thing. And I also learned from year one, after going through 4 seasons, there's never a perfect season. There's always something to contend with outside with the elements, whether it's flies, mosquitoes, snow, freezing rain, so there's all that. And at the same time, it's funny you said romantic, because it's from a place of pure love that I'm caring for them. And oftentimes I forget to stop and enjoy the moment with them and receive whatever gifts they have for me in that moment. It's easy to go and think I got to do this, I got to do that. And so just being with the horses is part of the thing that really, had me step into this journey. Because when you stop and just become present with a horse, everything kind of stops. The whole world around you seems to disappear. Time seems to disappear, and you're just in this moment, whether you're in the paddock or in a stall with a horse, and you start to be able to access the voice of our soul, of your heart, listening to, because we're so often stuff's always going right. So to just stop and have a moment, and I'm doing a better job now of just stopping and enjoy. And it doesn't have to be, I'm going to spend an hour just being with a horse now. It can just be 2 minutes. It can just be 2 minutes. And it's like that little mini meditation that kind of brings me back to center. So yeah, it's a combination of it's work. And yet, in a given day, it's not like 10 hours of work with the horses. It takes me an hour to feed. If I have to go clean stalls or do whatever. Yesterday, I happened to be there longer because I was having their feet done, their pedicures, as I call it. And then we did some training with my project horse. So that was like so rewarding, because here's a horse that I got less than 2 years ago, never had a halter on him. His name was Havoc at the time. He's now named Haven. I tried to I got a halter on him fairly soon after he arrived. And then I tried to walk him from one paddock to the next, which is a little bit of a trek. And I thought we were ready. Oh, so speaking of patience and feeling, I thought we were ready because I was impatient and I wanted him to join the others in the front paddock, and we weren't ready. And he bolted. And so imagine 100 acres of property, and he ran, rope on him, just running. And I had about 7 or 8 volunteers that happened to be there that day. It took us an hour and a half to get him in. And so as soon as we did get him in, I just fell to the ground. And I realized just a couple weeks ago that event was actually still kind of traumatizing me, because I was afraid that he would continue to do that. He's been out a few times, maybe 3 or 4, and he had bolted almost every time. Not in the same way, like not an hour and a half adventure. But then it made me not want to try with him, especially because I'm by myself mostly, right? So then you're like, if I had volunteers there helping me, so I didn't want to risk, him ending up on the road or whatever the case may be. So anyway, yesterday, I'm so, like, you could see I walked him all the way up to about 6 feet away from the barn door. No bolting. And he was almost leading me. He's like, come on, what's up here? All the other horses, except one, were in the barn too. So he was like leading me. So, these little victories that I think they're all metaphors for life, right? We want to get ahead. We want to do something. We have to overcome fears, beliefs, this is going to happen. It's not going to be good. My horse could die. And then he's teaching me, it's okay. You got this. We've built our connection and we're going to get there. And it's all about staying tuned in the moment and going by feel. So I was very happy yesterday about our accomplishment. And now it's like, okay, now what? So the goal is to get him into a stall and then feeling comfortable in a stall, because now imagine he's been outside of a stall for 5 years, like his whole life. He's 5 years old, 5.5. It's hard to say when they're mostly rescues, right? So, and he was bred to be a bucking horse.
Amazing.
So, and that experience in and of itself is empowering, right? It takes leadership. I'm basically having to take all kinds of leadership skills, communication, to facilitate the movement from one place to another. And it seems simple, but there's lots of moving parts, and you're dealing with a live 1,000-pound animal.
Yeah. Who doesn't really care about you. Well, now probably there's that bond and connection, but
exactly,
he's going to do or she's going to do her own thing, whether you like it or not. So it's teaching you a lot of life lessons as well. And I like the fact that you're taking your experience with the horses and the Freedom Herd back to your life, back to who you are. We talked about your career ahead of today before you started this business, and you were a marketing assistant and in an ad agency, and then you had bigger marketing roles. And did you imagine then that, one day you'd be doing what you're doing? Did you ever sit and look out the window and go, yeah, one day, and then and then when did the dream start to take shape?
Great question. I never imagined in a million years that this is what I would be doing. Never in a million years. And I guess the whole transition or the inkling of maybe I'm meant to do something else, that started probably about 2004. I was working at TELUS Mobility at the time, and I was missing fulfillment. I was missing meaning, joy, anything. And there was one experience. I was managing a partner, a loyalty program called Perks. And so at the time we had a program that was created for the kind of like the top spending clients. And so I went to the senior VP of sales and marketing, and I said, listen, this is my idea. How about they'll get 3 options to choose a gift from TELUS. And one of the options will be, a donation made to, a list of various charities. Mm-hmm. So when I delivered a check for over 40,000 to Boys and Girls Clubs, I was like, I need more of this. I need more of this kind of feeling like what I'm doing is having some kind of positive impact in the world. So I got curious, and I discovered coaching, which was great. Again, horses were nowhere in the picture. And when I went through the coaching training with Coaches Training Institute, 3 of the teachers, the instructors, said, you should really consider our leadership program. And at the time, I did not see myself as a leader. This was 2005. Did not see myself as a leader. I thought, oh, okay, are they paying you? Like, you probably say that to everybody. Like, I did not have any amount of high self-esteem. And I was constantly in the corporate world. I was constantly in the mode of trying to prove myself.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
As so many people do.
Wow.
And
I'm in that corporate ladder,
Yeah. Well, and I never really had the desire. That was part of my thing. I knew I didn't feel like I wanted to climb that ladder. I was seeking approval, but I didn't necessarily want to climb. So that was when I was like, okay, this is not what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. I knew that, but I had no idea really what. And then, like I said, I kind of discovered the coaching. Then I ended up getting packaged out of TELUS and was able to take that leadership program, which I didn't have the means to do before that. And through the leadership program, they kept asking, what were you born at this time in history to do? And it was that was a challenging course or program. It was 10 months in California, 4 trips. And so I came away from that, or I stood in front of a group of 20 people, and I said, I was born at this time in history to show people how to take off their masks and be real. And I was crying at the time, and I was hiding. And the instructor was like, now show us how, like, don't turn and hide the tears. Right. So that's what happened there. And I had been packaged out. I got my next job at Universal Music Canada. And it was that discomfort of, I want to quit this job, but I need the money. Because I was a city girl, like totally downtown, harborfront, condo. My life is completely transformed. And that's the power that working with horses too, and me, does. It's like we're looking at helping people overcome their fears of, and believing in themselves that they can actually go and make a living doing the thing that they love. Right. But we got this ego story that says, no, you can't do that. Anyway, I was like, I can't leave. And the limbo place is the most painful. For anybody who might be listening to this, is like that limbo place is so uncomfortable. And then when you listen and you take the leap, which was what I ended up doing, everything, like the whole world, we've heard this, the whole universe conspires when you take a leap of faith. So, and even still, again, horses were nowhere in the picture. And what happened was, as I navigate my first business, and so this takes us to how we met back in 2007, my first business was Dare to Be Real Coaching and Consulting. And I was evolving and pivoting. I was going into businesses and, doing workshops around being real and around trust. And I was like, that's not really, still not feeling the joy that I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And then I was in schools, and I was doing speeches and workshops in schools for girls and boys around, again, being real. And the teachers and principals, guidance counselors, they were like, do you have anything just for girls? The girls are really struggling with self-esteem. I was like, oh yeah, hello, I'm a girl. I've gone through a lot of stuff, in terms of self-esteem, and I believed I wasn't lovable because of all the stuff that had happened in my life. And so through that, I got connected to this 15-year-old girl in Florida who wanted to interview me. And I didn't understand why until afterwards. She told me horses saved her life, and they help you get grounded and focused and present and you become a better leader and you build your confidence and your self-esteem. And I'm in my condo, tears streaming down my face, going, oh my goodness, how cool would it be to marry my love of horses, which had been dormant? Because as a teenager, I was on a farm. I lived on Liberty Street and had a farm. I didn't have a farm. I lived on a farm, and I had a horse named Lady, but I had a traumatic experience with her. And so after that, I was like, that's it, never riding horses again. And my parents split, sold the farm a couple years later, and I was away from horses for 24 years.
Wow.
When I'm finding out from this girl about all these gifts that they have to offer people. And I thought, oh my gosh, I want to marry these two things. And immediately I thought, well, we have a little bit of a problem because I'm still afraid of horses.
I got
So,
thrown off two of them too, by the way.
that's why you haven't been to see them yet.
Yeah, I'm okay up close. Just don't put me on one, you know.
Yes.
I was going right like head first into a barn because the
Yeah.
horse went back into the barn, and I'm going, oh man, I'm gonna be like one of those cartoons, you know. You'll see the hole in the head. And then somebody, thank God, somebody yelled out, duck, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. I ducked.
Was it a trail ride?
I was at a camp, like a summer camp. I was like
Yeah.
13, 14.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I guess we were going to go out on the trails. Yeah.
Yeah.
The next time was up in Orangeville. Relatives of mine had a farm,
Uh-huh.
and we were riding bareback to the barn to put on the saddles. And the horse, I was still a young kid too, went up and I went back.
You went down? You went off? Yeah. Yeah. So that's the thing. I actually love working with people who have these kinds of experiences because there's meaning in all of it, right? Like I was a teenager, and in that moment, I created so many meanings, not even aware of it until just a few years ago, looking at all the stories that were all the beliefs, limiting beliefs that I created in that moment and bought into. I'm powerless. My horse abandoned me. I'm useless. I'm not efficient. Like so many things. My horse doesn't love me. And here I am now, right? Sharing insights and wisdom with people around how these are stories and we are powerful. And my soul wanted me to have that experience so that ultimately I could come back to horses. I made it my mission to overcome my fear of them in order to help people overcome their own fear and trauma so that they can directly apply what they've learned to their own calling, whatever that might be, or to just to identify stories so that, you don't have to be, whatever you're doing, usually there's a story. It's like we got a blinders on, right? There's something wrong. I don't deserve to make this much money, for example, right? What I do is I go back and I look at where did you create that belief so that we can reframe it, release it, thank it, love it, let it go. And then you have a whole different experience where you can evolve and expand and become more of who you really are. Right. Yeah. So basically, yeah, I went to Florida. I got on a plane and I started the journey of overcoming my fear. And that was 2009. And 6 years later, and I had written, and this is, the power of, again, this is how powerful we are. I had written on a little piece of paper that in 5 years, I wanted a retreat center. So that was 2009 or 10. I wrote that because I got certified as a facilitator of equine experiential learning. And then it was literally 5 years when I took that leap and, moved to a 30-acre horse property and had 7 horses join me in less than a week.
You mean you left Oshawa? Like the nerve,
I did. It was temporary.
Yeah, I know.
It was a temporary spot. Yeah.
We're with Mena Canonico, and we're talking about healing, change, loss, grief. We talked again offline, Mena, about what we're all kind of going through right now, and you even made mention of it on your TikTok and somewhat on Facebook. that people are going through loss and change, over the past 2 years. It's been almost like nonstop, nonstop, like gut punches in how we lived our lives. And you've had loss as far as your work goes, or loss and grief around losing your mom. With the transformational coaching and healing work you're doing, how do you empower clients that you work with to reframe loss and grief and manage to move forward?
Well, I mean, first of all, I draw on my own experience. I did go through 7 transitions in less than 3 years. So through that process, I learned a lot. And so in large part, it's about just educating people on how, again, the soul knows the way for each of us. So what happens is, I'll use the example of my mom and my heart horse, Shiloh, who both passed within 1 year. So that was 2018 and 2019. And so it was kind of a good indicator of, or an example of kind of what's happening, right? It's like there's all kinds of loss and things that are, make us sad. And by the way, nothing can make us sad. There's sadness that lives in us as unresolved grief. And then these losses or these experiences help to surface it so we can actually look at it and clear it. And again, for the ultimate goal of freedom, right? We didn't come here to be attached to people. If I think about, or I use the example of horses, right? The horses had their parents. Most horses are not with their parents and close to their parents and needing their parents or siblings or whatever to feel good enough, right? So it's about kind of not detangling,
Detachment.
Detaching. We each came here to be a sovereign being. We each came here as sovereign beings, and then ego mind says, I need this person or I need this animal. So my mom passed, and if I look at it from my perspective, it's like, oh, that's sad, that's terrible. She was my biggest champion, and then I had Shiloh, who was my second biggest champion, and then both of them are gone. And so all my stuff is coming up. They abandoned me. They didn't love me to stick around further. What am I going to do without them? Right? So these are all the ego stories that we have an opportunity to really look at. And the perspective shift is seeing it as these experiences, and they're playing, those two, for example, played the perfect role for me to actually discover my own strength, my own resiliency, and to put into practice what I teach, which is any experience like this is designed to help us expand and grow. And, there's so much fear right now in the collective around dying and death. And, one of the things I've learned that's so powerful is that, again, first of all, the soul is creating each experience and knows when, but also knows what's going to be for the highest and best good for all the people around that person or animal or whatever the case may be. So when you start to even just see that as an option, like it's like the blinders come off and you say, oh, okay, this is there's so much love and awe and reverence that I've experienced. Like I said, each and every single one of these 7, it was like, wow, they played their perfect role for me to expand and grow and become more independent and be more of who I came here to be. Now, the thing that's tricky too is we can get burdened and weighed down if we're holding on to guilt or regret. And that shows up in, periods of grief that go on for long amounts of time. But also, again, there's no guilt and grief. It's like there's another ego mind story, right? But that's why grief sometimes goes on for so long, because we're holding on to illusions of, if I did this, or I should have done that, or I wish I had done this, if I'd only said that, there's so many things. It's like a constant, like, I say to clients, like, put the stick down and trust that their soul, chose the perfect time for them and for you. And now they're giving you a gift in terms of, because here's the thing, if we don't look at these stories, then that holds us back in the areas of our life that we want to achieve or see success, right? So if you're holding on to any guilt, resentment, you're not going to you're going to self-sabotage, and you're going to limit the amount of success that you will allow yourself to experience. And it's not a conscious thing.
Wow.
That's why when we're hitting that wall, to me, whenever I hit the wall, it's like, oh, I got a subconscious story. I got some story that's asking me to look at it.
Right. Oh my gosh, that's a huge breakthrough. Whenever
Good.
you're hitting the wall, there's usually a subconscious story behind it.
Yeah.
That you might not be good enough or deserving or what have you. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember, Franco Di Nicola, he's one of the 7, and he's one of the more recent departures. Last September, he chose his transition. Oh no, I just forgot what I was going to say.
Oh, one of the teachers, one of the 7. What did he teach you?
No, what did you just say before that?
Oh, that we hit the wall, and it teaches you, like,
Yes.
It's sort of there's that thought pattern or
yeah, I remember
belief that we need to look at to heal and let go of.
Yeah. And so what happens often, not knowing, we hit that wall and we're frustrated, and then it creates sometimes some depression and some, like, I'm not good enough and what's wrong with me, and you want to pull your hair out. And so even if you just know, hey, all this means is there's a story, or if you get triggered, we want to avoid being triggered, most of us. And the thing is, a trigger is a beautiful catalyst and for transformation. And it's asking for, the soul's like, here it is on a platter. You're ripe. So when somebody comes to me and they're like, this just happened, I'm like, perfect, let's go to work, because it's right there. Now you see it. If it's triggering, it's coming to the surface because you're ready to look at it. If you have that awareness. If you don't, then you'll have the trigger. You'll point the finger at somebody else, blame them, right? So right now, even in what was happening in the world right now, right? There's a lot of finger pointing and blaming, and everything that's happening is giving us an opportunity to look at our own inner landscape and see, okay, where am I holding judgment? Where am I holding anger? Where am I holding guilt? Where am I blaming whatever? And what's this really about for me, right? So that you can get neutral. Neutral is where all the power lies. Right. So we want things to be different instead of shifting the perspective and saying, wow, I love what's happening right now. Oh yeah, that's what I was going to say about Franco. Whenever there was a point, I traveled for 3 years as part of my journey of overcoming my fear. I did a traveling sabbatical, and I had some experiences. It was like one thing after another, right? And it's kind of like what's happening right now. Right. And so you can choose how you look at it. I said at the time, oh my gosh, like how much more of this do I have to go through? Like, I don't want any more. And he's like, no, you do. I'm like, what do you mean I do? He goes, no, you do. You're on an accelerated purge. So my soul chose to go through these experiences as an accelerated purge, so I could clear all this crap out of the way and start to emerge more as myself. And that's exactly what's happening right now. If we have that perspective and put those glasses on, then it shifts how we perceive everything that's happening right now. And you can stop resisting it or judging it and just say, okay, like, what is this here to show me? And the next hit that we get is like, okay, what's this really about? Does that make sense?
Yeah, but how do we get people to think like what we're talking about? Because at first blush, you see a news story and you go, oh, F Trudeau or that Putin, and now they're even arguing with each other. I think Russia won't allow Trudeau into Russia right now, so he's a little miffed. How do we bring this sort of thinking and managing these situations that we're all collectively being faced with day to day? How do we get people to sort of reframe it? That's a big challenge if when I stop and think about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, and this is partly my work, and this conversation is part of that, because if you don't know, you don't know.
Yeah.
And by the way, there are some people that are never going to embrace this perspective that I'm offering, right? And I'm not here to tell people, hey, you need to embrace this. I'm just here sharing my experience, and then trusting that the people who this resonates for, they say, oh, hold on a sec. Yeah, that actually does resonate for me. And then, okay, what would be the next step? So it's really about, and that's why even like I'm launching my own podcast to share more of these truths and teachings, because there's not a lot of awareness about it, right? Like, Franco was leading edge and now he's not here. So I feel like, okay, we need to share these things, but I'll share.
Don't know, Franco de Nicolo was a spiritual teacher based north of Toronto, and had quite a really good reputation and well known in the landscape of spiritual teachers. Kind of a Canadian guy that did really well, or got out there and became well known within that realm and community. And unfortunately, he passed in September.
Or fortunately.
Yeah, true.
Right. This is the thing. From his perspective, right? His soul chose, and it was perfect timing, and it was the way everything needed to be. And as I see it, his transition and the timing of it was to really inspire me and others like me to step forward and start sharing what we know, right? So his transition was a catalyst in a way, and at the same time it was exactly what his soul wanted and needed. And so there's nothing unfortunate about that, unless we think, I need my mom, I need my heart horse, I need Franco, right? So, but going back to, I want to go to the Trudeau story, because I think sharing my experience might help, because I've obviously had the same, frustration sometimes listening to Trudeau speak.
I still do.
Yeah, it's like almost every time. But and so he's offering us great opportunities. He's the perfect role player. And this will be, as you're listening to this, just be mindful that ego is going to come in and want to be right. Okay. So Trudeau says what he says, you're wanting to pull your hair out and go, right? And what's true is everything he's doing and saying, again, is bringing to the surface whatever judgments we have, whatever anger, and it's giving us an opportunity to become empowered. And if you look at even what he did with the truckers, for example, and saying, you have to be vaccinated. No, you don't have to be. Yes, you do have to be vaccinated. That was brilliant. Look what happened. The truckers got inspired. The truckers, it catalyzed the truckers to say, no, we're going to do something. Then that inspired so many Canadians to step forward. Like, and then we had all that happen in Ottawa, which again, depending on where you sit, so, some people think that that wasn't a great experience. But if you look at the love, the unity, the harmony, it was beautiful to see. And that representation for me was like, oh, this is a little glimpse of the collaborative kind of world that we are going to be creating. We can't create it though, until those people that we have as placeholders. And by the way, we've all agreed to this. We voted them in. We said, oh, one guy is going to be the guy that's going to save us.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Right. And that's not how it works. So right now, everything that's happening is so that this whole system can crumble. And also as a reminder, and this again was from Franco, as I worked through some of my own personal challenges with certain individuals, we have to remember that, again, our souls are guiding everything, and no one is a victim. No one is ever a victim.
I just took a deep breath because I got to take that in, and really and embrace that.
Yeah.
And it's a shift in thinking and consciousness.
Exactly. And when you think about all the sadness and grief right now, it's because we have bought into a story that we can be a victim. When you embrace and really embody the knowing that our souls guide everything, no one can ever be a victim. So all that to say, we are empowered. Like everything we're doing, we may not feel empowered, but from a soul level, we're guiding everything. And now I can't remember why I started with that victim mindset thing.
Well, just the lesson that you got from, your views on our, Canada's leader.
Yes, and actually it was coming down to an experience with a family member where I viewed myself as a victim. And it was a massive shift for me to get, and this is so pivotal for me to understand that my soul had an agreement with this other soul and asked this person to play the specific role for my growth and evolution so that I could come back to remembering how powerful I am. And it's exactly the same with Trudeau. So I did that work that I did with this family member and applied it to Trudeau. And then when you remember, we've asked them to play this role for us. And it's not an easy role to play. Like, think about for a second. And again, this takes real discipline and mastery to take yourself out of the opinion that you have and just really stand in those shoes for a second and think, would I like to play that role? No, it's not an easy role to play. So, but they agreed out of love for us. Mm-hmm. And when I had that moment with Trudeau, like I was overcome with emotion. Because really, if you think about the human and what is happening right, it's not a fun place. I would not want to be him. But again, it brings us back to how powerful we are. We're the ones who said as a collective, hey, we're going to vote you in. And this, by the way, this is not just about politics. This is anything, anybody. Now you could have a coworker, you could have, a parent, you could have a sibling, whatever. Doesn't matter who it is. If you feel like a victim, one of the fastest paths to freedom is looking at why you would have asked them to play that role and how they are helping you to step into who you really are.
So who are we really?
Who are we really? We are pure love. We are everything. I'm going to go right back to the horses. And when you are in the for me anyway, too, when I'm in the presence of horses, I'm most connected to the truth of who I am. I'm in the moment. There's no judgment. Like I said, everything just goes away and all you feel is expansiveness. And so that's who we are. We are ultimate creators of everything. And it's what drives me and inspires me is just knowing that there's so many people out there struggling, suffering, because they're believing misconceptions and illusions about who they are. So as an entrepreneur, you might know that you have this mission and you're feeling like you want to, and this was me too, banging my head against the wall. It's like, it's not happening. It's not happening. Well, that's just because there's some stories that have to come to light and be shifted and released so that you can move forward again in more power, right? But if you're holding on to grief, resentment, a lot of people, I'll tell you, I did not consider myself to be someone who'd experienced traumatic events. If you said to me, oh, you've got unresolved trauma, I'd be like, I'm fine. Yeah, I had some shit happen, but I just kept going. Right. So you have two kinds of people, right? You have those people that just keep going and they don't really let it affect them. I mean, it does, but it doesn't until it does when you hit the wall. Or you have the one who's going to go, oh, poor me. And then you allow that to keep you down and believe you're a victim. Right. So, but for people who, typically type A, right? I got to prove. It's almost like it's a natural connection that underneath that at some point you believed that you weren't lovable or you weren't good enough. So now you had to prove yourself, had to do extra to prove it even more.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes it's interesting to work with clients when, they don't really see themselves as having experienced trauma and, they think they're fine. But when you're in the presence of the horses and me, because of, it's like I hone in on language and patterns. And then the horses help me to see what is not visible as well. So it's pretty magical. It's very cool.
I had so many questions prepared, but I think you answered them so beautifully. Just last question, and you've already sort of alluded to it, but how do the horses actually help heal a client that comes to your, to your farm? How does that actually work? I can't really answer that question 100%. Like what I can say is they know things, like they're at a whole different level of consciousness. They know things that, I'll give a little example. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. I had a meet and greet. Whoa. You just froze. Okay, we just froze. You were saying you had a meet and greet.
Oh yeah, now it says my internet connection is unstable. Okay, so yeah, I had a meet and greet with my horses in the barn a couple years ago, and there was a young man who came in, and he was gravitating towards Dream. Dream is my blue-eyed paint horse, and he has that effect. They like magnets. They draw you in if they want to somehow share a message or work with you. Anyway, so Dream was engaged with this young man, and Dream started yawning. So this is one simple way that they assist us. They tend to yawn if they're releasing tension or frustration that we might be carrying energetically in our bodies. Okay. So how does that, I don't know. I can't really define that. It's part of the magic. So he's yawning. And so I said to the young man, I said, so when they do that, this is my indicator that that you've got some energy, that you've got some tension that you've been storing. I said, have you been stressed out? And he was like, yeah. Then Dream started pawing on the ground. And I said, okay, so now he's letting me know that there's actually, it's not just a little bit of stress, like there's something much more agitating. I said, does that resonate? And he's like, yeah, I just got out of the hospital. I was in the hospital for 5 days. And I said, oh, okay, you're going to be all right. And he said, yes, I'm going to be fine. I said, okay, good. And then Dream did something he's never done before. He started to bite his hand. And it wasn't like I'm attacking you, and it wasn't a cute little nibble. It was somewhere in between. And again, he'd never done this before. So I just kind of went, okay. Like I just asked myself, what are you trying to tell me, Dream? And it came through, and I didn't want to say it. Part of me didn't want to say it, but I had to. So I just said, did you just try hurting yourself? And he said, I just tried committing suicide.
Oh my God.
And I said, oh, and he said, that's astounding. How did you guys know? I don't know. Like, I don't know. How did he know? How did I know? It's intuition, magic, whatever. I don't know what you want to call it, but that's just, again, the tip of the iceberg. So often with clients, in a typical setting, it's easy for clients to be slippery and avoid the question or not want, because we got this ego program saying, oh, that you don't want, that's embarrassing. You don't want to say that, you got shame, and the thing is, working with the horses, it's about pure ultimate love. There's no judgment. So that young man in that moment, and by the way, I said to him, I said, are you okay if I share this story? Because people don't understand that this is the level. And again, this is just tip of the iceberg. If I had the opportunity to work with him, I would have gone deeper into where did you get the idea that, it'd be better for you to be gone. But he proceeded to have about 10 minutes with Dream, and it was like a love fest. And that young man walked out of that barn a changed person.
Wow. And
that's just the tip of the iceberg. So how do they, partly their hearts are probably, I think, I can't remember, it's 5 or 10 times the size of ours. Wow. They're helping us energetically, again, kind of come back to our true nature. Remember, they help you get grounded. So you're out there living your life and you're spinning in your head. You can't even, and then if you're fearful, right, you can't really even think clearly. So the first thing is just coming into the presence with them and allowing yourself to come back to here. And then, like I said, then I'm working with them to see what things are coming up. I did a private retreat with a woman. It was 1.5 days. She came having a traumatic experience with the horse that she'd completely forgotten about. I asked her, what's your experience with horses? And she said nothing. And then she said, oh, wait, no, and it was similar to yours with coming back into the barn. And so she had this traumatic experience at 16. So by the time we went out to meet the horses, it had been surfaced. And I have one horse named Shaman, he's a powerhouse. He's like a tank. And again, they know exactly what to do. So he knew, this is, I can say he knew it would be too much for him to do this with her, but with me, he gave me like a nudge, and she freaked out and she wanted to leave the paddock. And I was like, oh, hold on a second, but this is what you came for, right? Because here's one thing I learned early on. When you are afraid of horses, especially if you've had a traumatic incident, it's mostly because you're afraid of your own power, or you have not connected to your own power. So she wanted to bolt, And I worked with her, and literally a minute later, Apollo, who's like my Mr. Solid, he comes over and he's got his nose in her in her heart space. And from being terrified, wanting to leave, she then was like laughing and joyful.
Aw.
And by the time we ended, so she went from terrified to the end of day and a half, walking Apollo through the trail on this 100-acre tree farm. And a few months later, she wrote me, and she didn't say that, she was going through some crisis, but she didn't tell me exactly the details of everything. Of course, we just got to work, and I just kind of peeled away as many things as possible in that time frame. And she wrote me months later and said, that experience was life-changing. I let go of my addiction to alcohol. I didn't even know there was an addiction to alcohol happening. I left my job. I left the city, and now I live and work in Northern Ontario out in nature.
Amazing.
So, and that's a combination. That's me also taking what I've learned through my own, developmental journey and my journey to freedom, and then bringing in like the things that the horses help me see that, again, because we're not even fully aware sometimes, of the subconscious things. So the horse will somehow help me see, and then I get to work to try and reframe it. And you need to have somebody who's really willing and committed to do that work. And if you have a calling, which is who I love working with, somebody who has a calling and it's like, I have to go out and make an impact, and it's my calling to serve people. Those are the people I really get excited about working with, because I know that whatever work I do with them is going to have a ripple effect that's going to, impact so many more people than I will ever even know.
And we forget that when we're working with the individual, there's tentacles in their lives, there's relationships, there's work, there's community that gets affected. We're really flush out of time. I want to thank you so much for a beautiful chat today. Where do we reach you? And what are some things you have coming up this spring?
Awesome. Well, you can reach me at libertylaneretreats.com. If you're on Instagram, you can find me at Mena and the Freedom Herd. I have a couple of meet and greets coming up in the next couple of weeks, but if you're on my Instagram or website, I'll be sharing new, innovative, leading edge experiences and events coming up this spring and summer and fall. And ultimately, if you go and opt in, my website's not fully finished. So if you opt in, you'll find out about more about my podcast when it's launched. And I also have a book. It's not my book. It's a anthology, also available on my website, called Animals and Our Emotional Well-Being. So there's 27 personal stories about animals and their impact on our lives. So there's a story of mine called Horses Free Your Mind and Soul. And so that's available on the website and on Facebook also, facebook.com/Liberty Lane Retreats.
Wonderful. What a joy today. I didn't talk much. I just let you do the talking because it was so rich today, Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to share, and I hope this serves your audience.
I think it did. And I thank you too, Mena. I'm your host, David Cohen. I trust you were inspired to rise today, and we will see you next week. Very soon. Next week we'll be here like that. Thanks so much, Mena.
Thanks, David. Have a great one.
Bye for now.